my pleasure to be able to introduce Rebecca. We have been good friends for quite a while and happened to run into each other in life back in 2002, I guess, the beginning of 2002, when we both decided to do a field study to India. So she and I were in the field together and had a really great experience. I think we had a fairly eclectic group. There were 5 of us, all females, and I think Rebecca and I quickly sought refuge in each other's company as we were kind of dealing with a combination of group dynamics and as we were dealing with culture shock and trying to figure out how to navigate through a culture that was entirely foreign to what we had experienced before. Rebecca is someone that I admire, have a great amount of esteem for. She is really intelligent and thoughtful, and the reason I think that I was so drawn to her in the field was because we could have very thoughtful conversations and processing those things that were happening around us, even though they were incredibly difficult at times. She did her bachelor degree in biochemistry and is currently pursuing a PhD in biochemistry here at BYU. She was the only hard science major in our group, so we would jokingly call her brain surgeon on occasion, as she would come up with some sort of quantitative hard science evidence that the rest of us hadn't even thought of or wouldn't naturally think of. But she also is interested in the social sciences and had some research along those lines that she was doing there, and did a minor in international development in her bachelor's degree. So she kind of has the unique ability, I think, to communicate to both worlds, if that makes sense, and not narrowing her thoughts so much, but to be able to take advantage of both of those areas of thought and to communicate clearly between the two. Anyway, I won't say any more. She's from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and served a mission in California. I don't know if you're going to go into those things, but just a little more insight into Rebecca and what she brings to the table. But we'll go ahead and let her give her presentation to us.
Thank you all for coming today. As Dave mentioned, the purpose of this lecture series is to allow past field study students to talk about their experiences, and I'm excited to be here and share that with you. It's been a long time since I did my field study. I got back in 2002, so it's a good chance for me to think back on it and reflect and think of some things I wanted to share with you today. For those of you who aren't exactly sure what a field study is, let me start by explaining it. A field study is similar to a study abroad in some senses, but it's much more individually tailored to the students who go. Whereas a study abroad to Italy, for example, might involve studying or taking classes in Italian and studying Italian architecture and literature or something like that. A field study gives the student an opportunity to pick his or her own research emphasis and to create his or her own research project and work on that the entire time of the field study. As Ashley mentioned, we went with a small group, just 5 girls. We were each studying different things, and we, we had a chance to gain a more tailor-made experience, I would say, in that respect. So the reason I was drawn to a field study is partly because I wanted an international experience. I wanted to go somewhere exciting and exotic, and it was all of that and much more important things. But also, as a science major, I wanted something that I could at least tie in a little bit to my science background. I had considered going into healthcare, and so I thought Italian architecture was interesting, but wouldn't really be very applicable. So I chose a field study to India, and I studied community healthcare development for my research project. So that's a little bit of an introduction. But my purpose today is to relate to you, kind of, if you saw the title of my talk, In Pursuit of Perspective, Integrating Development with Life Science, is to relate to you somewhat of my journey, I guess you could say, in trying to mesh my interests in the social sciences and the life science, because I find them both to be fascinating and valuable, and I've also found it to be a struggle to integrate those two. But trying to do so has given me a lot of perspective on life and other things, and so I wanted to share that with you today. So hopefully, whether you're a science person or a development person or just saw the poster or whatnot, you can gain something from what I have to say. So let me talk a little bit about what my perspective was before my field study, and then during my field study, and then after my field study today. for my field study, I didn't know much about development or international issues or cultural issues or anything like that. I thought it sounded exciting, but wasn't really aware of anything. I pretty much thought of development in terms of those commercials you see on TV with the faces of little children in a developing country who look sad or unhealthy or something like that, but still very cute, and they ask you to give a donation so that you can support this child. That was pretty much all I knew about development, and thought it was great, but didn't know much more. So I felt very distant from the developing world or any other culture or anything like that. So thankfully I decided to do a field study, and I went in the fall semester of 2002, as I said, and I went to India. And here's a map of India. Sorry, I couldn't find one that was a little more clear, but our group, the year that we went, there had been some significant political unrest in the northern part of India, and so we just went to the southern part of India. And if you look, we flew into Chennai down here, and then we traveled kind of going down to near the end of the coast, and then we came up here to a place near Mumbai or Bombay, and then we went back down here to a city called Coimbatore, and we stayed for a couple months in a village just outside of Coimbatore called Chavati. And so we didn't get to see the northern part of the country, which gives me a good reason to go back someday. But we did get good exposure to the culture and the people in southern India, which is fairly different from northern India in many ways. And I still felt like we got to see a lot. When we took a train from near Mumbai back down to Coimbatore, it was a 30-hour train ride, and that's less than half of the vertical distance of the country, I guess you could say. So it was a good experience. But I took classes while I was there. I took a world religions class and a culture class looking at the culture of India, and also did a research project, which I'll talk more about in a little bit. These classes entailed reading, doing interviews, observations of different religions or of health practices and that kind of thing, and also doing surveys. And let me tell you a little bit about the village that we stayed in. This is a picture of Coimbatore, which is the city that the village was right outside. Here's a main road in the city. You can see there are lots of different forms of transportation, and it's somewhat crowded. As a side note, you can see there are dashed lines indicating lanes in the street, but those were pretty much ignored. Oh, sorry. Here is a look, or looking out of the house where we were staying. Here's some of the homes in the village. There's a little water tap right here. Sorry, I'm not very adept with this. There's a water spout right here where the villagers got water and kept it in these buckets. You can see some of the clothes that they're wearing. This is a home nearby us. This man is sorting flowers to sell. Here's a sanctuary, or a place of worship with a little shrine, I guess you could say, dedicated to one of the Hindu gods that was just down the road in the village. This is where we ate breakfast every morning. This man is pouring the milk to cool it off for us. He was incredibly talented. He didn't hardly ever spill a drop. And then these are a couple of little kids that came around and liked to laugh at us a lot. We didn't really know what they were saying, but we were glad they were amused. And here, walking to the village from the main road, we would pass a school, and if we ever passed school when the children were getting out, they'd flock us and be so excited to see us and say, "What is your name?" and all these things. And if you pull out your camera, they are very excited to get their picture taken. So you can see I've kind of chopped off the heads of some of them here because they were too close to me. But hopefully this kind of gives you a feel for where I was staying and what the conditions were like. It was very, very simple, a very simple lifestyle. And for me, it was something I'd never experienced before. And as a result, it caused me to think about a lot of things that I hadn't thought about before, which was beneficial to me. So I did an internship there with an NGO, non-governmental organization called Shanti Ashram. And here's a slide with some information on Shanti Ashram. From the website, up at the top, I don't know if you can read it, but they kind of state their purpose. I'll read it for you. It says, "The vision that guides the work of Shanti Ashram is Sarvodaya, welfare of all, as articulated by Mahatma Gandhi. This Gandhian principle provides a spiritual frame for the ashram's commitment to social action. It is hoped that through concrete social action, Shanti Ashram will help make Parur was the area around Coimbatore where we were staying, a model block where poverty can be alleviated and holistic development achieved. The ashram sees her role as that of a catalyst to empower the different sections of the village community. Over here on the right is a graphic they've put together with Gandhi in the center and also indicating some of their activities. You can see up here they're meeting with some children. They're having a meeting of women where they're talking about financial stability and other issues. This looks like they're giving out some kind of service or offering or something like that. Shanti Ashram has a lot of projects. They focus on a lot of different development areas, which are listed here on the left. They do Bala Shanti. It's a program for children where they try and teach children and have good schools and education for them. They do women's development, community health, environmental restoration, participatory agroforestry, peace education and interfaith collaboration, poverty alleviation, youth leadership, and Panchayat Raj research and training, which has to do with the government structure and political involvement in India. So it's a pretty diverse spread of efforts that they have in development in their community. But I was impressed in working with them to see that they were able to be effective in providing some relief or sustainment or help in these areas. A couple more pictures. Sorry, here's the group, essentially everybody who worked for Shanti Ashram. Right here in the middle is the wife of the founder of Shanti Ashram. Her husband has since passed away. And then over here at the left is the director. Her name is Vinu Aram. She is a pediatrician by profession and came to do a master's degree in the States after she'd received her medical degree in India, and then came back, and she pretty much runs most of Shanti Ashram's programs. And I was able to work directly with her, kind of shadowing her and talking to her about a lot of different things, and gained a lot of valuable insight from her. And my last picture is this. This is an example of the Bala Shanti program that they had, where they had established this small school where these preschool or early elementary school age children could come who wouldn't otherwise have had the opportunity to get a very solid education. And so you can see they've got lots of interactive activities and things to do and that kind of thing. So it was a good environment for these kids. So my research was about development, and I thought it would be good to talk a little bit about what development is before I try and explain what I thought about it or what I learned about it. Development can be focused on a lot of things depending on who you ask, or you can get a lot of definitions depending on which person you talk to, as you might well know. It can be focused on economic development, political development, education, healthcare, etc. And also another term which can be applied is human development, which is kind of what I ended up focusing more on, or I would rather say a perspective of development that I ended up adopting, I think. There's a statement that kind of describes what I think development is in this respect, and it's from the Human Development Report of 2001, produced by the UN, and it says, "Human development is about expanding the choices people have to lead lives that they value. Fundamental to enlarging these choices is building human capabilities, the range of things that people can do or be in life." And so I think you could say in general, no matter which aspect of development you're talking about, there's an overall goal of improvement or progression or sustainable growth, I guess you could say. As an example of this, the UN in 2000 came up with a set of goals, development goals that they wanted to establish by 2015. And I'll read you a few of these just to kind of give you a feel for what some of the things they were talking about. They wanted to reduce the maternal mortality ratio by 3/4, reverse the spread of HIV/AIDS, half the proportion of people who lived on less than $1 a day, improve the lives of at least 100 million slum dwellers, and their purpose overall was to keep the eyes of the world focused on human development, which they hope to do through these goals. So you can see some of these are more quantitative, some seem like they would be, you could see more directly how they could implement them, some might see a little more vague. Improving the lives of slum dwellers, what exactly does that entail? But also, I learned some more about development from a man named Amartya Sen, who wrote some insightful literature about a new, or maybe a little more general perspective to take on development. And he referred to development in terms of freedom and increasing the freedoms that people have in their lives so that they, in turn, can go ahead and achieve the goals that they have. And instead of maybe having somebody from the outside come in and try and define goals or something like that. And he said, "Our conception of needs relates to our ideas of the preventable nature of some deprivations and to our understanding of what can be done about them." So he's saying that we see need based on what we think we can provide in response to those needs. and that can be a positive thing, but also in some ways that can limit how we see development. He also said that one should enhance the understanding of the nature and causes of poverty and deprivation by shifting primary attention away from means to ends that people have reason to pursue, and correspondingly to the freedoms to be able to satisfy these ends. So in light of that, my research topic was community healthcare development. I looked at healthcare development within the rural communities around this area that we were living and tried to understand what things would make a development project successful in that respect. Some things that I noted that were key to development in a general sense and also specifically in healthcare was that in order to provide any type of relief or to improve the situation at all, you needed to understand where the villagers or the people you were trying to provide relief to, where they were coming from, what their perspective was. I think we often take it for granted that we know the basics of hygiene and sanitation. We know how to tell when we're sick. We might even know what we're sick with and that kind of thing. But if you haven't been raised with that or been taught that all your life, you might not be as aware of that. And so I tried to understand where exactly the villagers were coming from and did some surveys and talked to them and that kind of thing to understand that. Also, I looked at the other end of it, at the healthcare providers, the doctors, the healthcare facilities, that kind of thing. Did they understand where the villagers were coming from? Did they know what the villagers' concerns were, or what might be keeping them from obtaining healthcare? And then I looked at what could be effective in helping to meet those needs. And overall, with some guidance and insight from Vino and other things that I read, I think the general conclusion of my research that I came to was that there needed to be a facilitative approach to development as far as community healthcare goes, that there needed to be somebody who could understand both the villager's perspective and also the healthcare provider's perspective, who would be able to kind of establish a linkage between the two and to help in having the efforts of development really be successful, that they would be able to communicate and to provide an essential perspective so that both parties involved would know more what was going on and what they could do to be effective. So instead of going into more of the details of exactly how I came to this conclusion or whatnot, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how these thoughts and these studies kind of enlarged my perspective and caused me to think about my own life and my career path and my studies and that kind of thing. So I think that coming out of my field study and my experience in India, I felt like I had a new perspective, that I felt like I understood more what was going on in the world and why it mattered, and started to think a lot more about what I thought about those things, what my own opinions and analyses were of it. I felt like I'd been presented with a lot of different ideas and perspectives, and that things that were new to me, and that was beneficial because it caused me to think about things that I hadn't thought about before. I felt like I had realized more so the value of social science. I've always liked the hard sciences because I feel like there is more quantitative data and more clear answers, which to some degree is true, but frankly when you get beyond some of the basic classes, you still have to work hard to find an answer sometimes. But that was one thing that attracted me to the physical sciences. But in social science and that kind of thing, sometimes the answer isn't always as clear. And though at times I might have been a little frustrated by that, I still found it to be intriguing and valuable to consider those things in my educational path and for my future career path. So when I got home from India, I remained a science major. I graduated in biochemistry, but I still wanted to stay involved in development. And so I was involved in Students for International Development, which is a club here on campus that gave me some good chance to attend lectures and forums where we talk about things. I finished my minor in international development, where there were some good classes that continued to broaden my perspective. And then came to the point where I was deciding whether I was going to go to grad school or what I was going to do and what I was going to pursue, and felt like I had some different options, such as getting a Master of Public Health or going on in biochemistry or things like that. And frankly, I felt pretty torn as to what I was going to do, because I felt like both things were valuable, but I didn't see very clearly how I could do both. And came to the conclusion that I couldn't do both at the same time. So I decided to go ahead with biochemistry and just be mindful of how I could be involved in development in the future. And that has given me some good insight, I think. And I think that no matter what career or area of work that we're in or study that we're in that in some ways we all face the same questions of trying to integrate two things that might be a little different or trying to keep a holistic perspective. So I guess from this point I'm looking on to the future and being a scientist, which is exciting to me, but also not wanting to lose the development perspective that I have. And so I've thought about how you can integrate development and life science. And I think most people would, the first conclusion most people would come to would be that, you know, life science can sometimes provide the answer to development problems. For example, if there's an illness or a disease, that maybe somebody in science can figure out a cure for it, and that would be exciting. And I think that at a first take that might seem like a logical combining of the two, but that it's really not as simple as that. And that with my experience, it's given me a better perspective as to really how to better integrate that. For example, going with this idea of maybe having an illness or something that's cured by a scientific technology or means. If you think about it, what's going to happen once this means gets outside of the laboratory? If they're going to send it to a foreign country, how are the people there going to know how to use it? Are they going to have means to store it? Some things have to be stored in a specific way to remain active or to remain to produce the desired effect. Or how is this going to change the social structure of people? Do they have pharmacies in other countries? How do they obtain their medications and things like that? And how are they going to continue to do that? These are just some kind of vague maybe questions, but the kinds of things that need to be considered in any development effort. And I think that most scientists might be initially excited to make such a discovery, which is fine, but that I like to have the perspective of seeing where it goes from there and what can be done with it. So my plan at this point is to go forward in my career in science, but ultimately to find ways to integrate development with my scientific knowledge. And I see that happening in a couple different ways. There are companies in industry or who do research who have more of a development-focused effort and are mindful of that and strive to practice good development along with good science. And so that's something I could look for in the future. And I'll give you an example of a successful, what I would consider to be a successful development science related project that I've seen recently. In my capstone class for my minor, kind of did a case study of a group, it's just a local group here on campus called Engineers Without Borders. You might have heard of it, and it's a chapter of a larger national society of engineers who tries to, you've probably heard of Doctors Without Borders before, but tries to take their engineering expertise and apply it to development situations. And so what the group here at BYU did was they developed a method for using coconut oil to make a biodiesel fuel. And they came up with a relatively simple process that could be implemented fairly easily. And they took it to the Polynesian Islands, and they had some collaborators there who were wanting to use the coconut oil that was naturally occurring on the island that they hadn't been able to use very effectively to make this fuel so that it would give a boost to their economy, it would provide a better resource, and help them to be a little more technologically advanced. So this group of engineers, these students, put together this big project, and they went over and they implemented it. And when I first heard about this, I thought, well, that sounds really cool, but I wonder how effective it really was. You know, I mean, they might just think they have a great idea and they go over to do this, but who knows what really happened, or if it's really going to work, or if people, the local people are going to be excited about it and think it's feasible. But so part of my class was I went and I talked with them and interviewed them and did a survey to see what exactly was going on with their project. And I was glad to come away actually impressed with what they had done. They had very good collaboration and ties with the people that they were working with in the Polynesian Islands, so that they didn't just have to come in and implement their project and then leave it without anybody to really carry it on. They had a fairly simple process, as I mentioned, that wouldn't be too complicated, and the resources that were required for the process were available there in the Polynesian Islands so that they could continue to keep the process going and keep it being productive after they left, because they were only there for a couple weeks. And they also had a way of continually keeping in touch with the people they'd left to implement the project after they'd come back to the U.S. in order to provide further assistance and kind of some evaluation, but also to leave the project in the hands of these people who understood the community and all the other details of life there in the Polynesian Islands so that they could be more effective at keeping it going. So from my perspective, as a science major and also having an interest in development, this is an exciting project for me because I see ways in which they were able to successfully integrate the two, and that gives me an idea of what to look for in my future career or studies or efforts and things like that. So I also, I guess kind of in closing, I've thought about how my perspective on development isn't just valuable in a career sense, but in a general life sense. And when I think back on some of the things that I feel I've gained or perspectives that I've gained from my field study experience, in some ways I would say that the questions that I've asked myself or the things that I've thought about just about humanity and life in general have been some of the most valuable things I've taken with me. And I see many, many ways in which those things can be applied in my future life. Whether or not I end up being a scientist, whether or not I end up being a developer or have a family, in all of those respects, I can find ways to be mindful of the development perspective that I've gained and to be mindful of how I can contribute to development efforts here in my own community or wherever I end up, which is something I think is really valuable because often we think of wanting to go save the world everywhere else around us, but really there are a lot of things that we can do in our own communities that are development related in their own sense. And in that respect, being in the community and knowing what's going on and having a clear understanding of that, it's a lot easier to do development rather than going off to India where I don't speak any of the language and have a limited knowledge. But I think overall that, as I've said, my development perspective is valuable to me, and I am excited to find ways to continue to see how to apply it in my future life. So thank you for your attention. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Rebecca, our groups working with the governments of countries such as India or I lived in the Philippines, and I know that the government there has kind of not been so wonderful to its people. If they use the resources which they have, which are many, and they have very rich resources, it seems like the government wouldn't allow the richness of their country to come down upon the people. It would be kept from them. Are groups working with governments to try to help integrate the help that we can offer between both the government and the people?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good question, and obviously it depends country to country or situation to situation, and I don't know all the ins and outs of that, but I think that's an example of why often in development people have different emphases. People will focus on political development and try to address questions just exactly like that of, you know, how can we work with the government? What's the government's perspective? What's the population's perspective? And what's really going on here, and what are the interactions and processes that need to happen in order to have any type of development effort to be effective and sustainable. I also think that's an example of why sometimes coming in from the outside to provide relief, as you said, can be a little difficult because you're not already involved or have the best understanding of the system or the situation.
I can also just add a quick thing on that. Places like India is a democracy. A lot of poor countries are democracies. And even though there is some corruption in the government, it's really not it's not as much the case as you would think that there is some kind of a ceiling or a stopping, keeping people in power. There's many governments that are genuinely doing everything they possibly can to try to reverse the cycle of poverty, and it just is very difficult. Even when you're trying to do everything you possibly can, these situations, these problems are extremely complex and very deep-seated in historical contexts and social contexts and cultural contexts.
Rebecca, is this okay? You talked about just very briefly that you went out and shadowed and got into the healthcare field, and that was your research. And you got perspective from that, and you talked about what you got, but what about what you found? Did you actually come away with something that helped changed things or contributed to the people you're trying to learn about?
You mean like a more of a concrete result, I guess you could say?
Yeah. Did it served you? Did it serve anyone
Right,
else?
right. No, it's a good question. It's a valid question. In that sense, my internship was kind of a two-way benefit, whereas I was there to learn from this organization and see what they were doing, and also to help them in their projects that they were doing. And so by doing that, while I was there, I was involved in their various projects, and not just went to observe, but went to be involved and contribute my own time and efforts to that. To be honest, I hadn't come to the field with an incredible knowledge of development or answers as to how to solve their problems, but more so with an outsider's perspective, so that as we sat in meetings or talked about things, that I would be involved in discussions and could kind of contribute in that way, as well as just offer my services while I was there to that organization. And they already had a lot of successful projects and programs going on, and so in that sense I felt that my role wasn't so much as to introduce or implement something new, but to provide my time and service, and then also come to understand more about development through their successful efforts. Does that answer your question?
Rebecca, I'd like to hear maybe a little bit more about your world religions class and just kind of how that experience fit in with your overall experience in the field, and maybe what that means to you now too.
That's a good question. So the world religion class, as I think I mentioned earlier, involves some interviews and some observations at various religious sites and some readings on different religions of the world. And so I think I didn't have much understanding of different religions of the world as I went into the class, but found studying that in the field to be very valuable. I think religion is one of the things that is so integrated into most people's lives. They might not even realize how much it is integrated, but it really affects cultures and communities and just how the world works. And so in studying that, I felt like I gained a new perspective of how other people see the world, and what things are significant to them, and how that affects their actions and their attitudes and the things they want out of life and things like that. And so I think that if you're going to understand a community or culture that you're trying to work with or just learn about, that's one of the key components to consider and to look into, because it really does have a broad effect. And as you asked, how does that affect me now? I think, again, it gives me greater appreciation for the variety of culture and perspective in the world, and hopefully more of an ability to relate to other people and not just think that my own way of seeing the world is standard.
Yes, I have a question. My question is, what opportunities for involvement are available to individuals that are not anticipating being able to go to India or work in a developing country, and that we're kind of confined to the United States? What opportunities for involvement are available?
You mean opportunities for involvement in foreign countries?
Yes.
So I would say there are boundless opportunities. There are different clubs and organizations on campus. I mentioned Students for International Development. There's Amnesty, different ones that you could look up and get involved in, and they have different activities, different speakers, different service projects, and more awareness type things that they do. Also, there are lots of organizations here, even in Utah Valley, that head up or contribute to development projects worldwide. And if you search for NGO, or if you search for development project on Google, you'll find a long list of opportunities. So there's a lot of chance to get involved.